People sometimes ask, what is the connection between my exploring and my creating of virtual worlds?
I strive to build virtual worlds that are more than mere high-quality simulation. I try to draw the player into a meaningful journey of personal discovery. A great virtual world is much more than a beautiful set where everything you see and everything you think will interact the way you expect it to.
I find that the same joy that I get out of exploring the real world directly impacts the passion that I have for creating virtual worlds for people to explore, and all the detail and all the joy that I might bring to them in that process of creation.
Most of the people who have had the chance to see the Earth from orbit describe something called the overview effect, which is a life-changing moment when they've had the chance to see the Earth from space over a period of time and suddenly come to this realization about the scale of the Earth and humanity's place within it.
Down on an area of the world that I do in the Texas Gulf Coast, my concept of the scale of the Earth collapsed.
By creating a world with such diversity, you get the opportunity to show the interdependence of humanity, where no one person can do all of the things that are required to keep a civilization vibrant and alive. And that only comes with the depth and breadth of a highly interdependent simulation, which is one of the things we try to provide.
heart says go, but my legs slow, cause no matter where I go, the sorrow loves to follow. Mind's at edge, losing sense, cause despite all the highs, there was no paradise in the end. Change has appeared to play its role, so take its hand or it's taking your throat. Don't fight the wave, just feel its force. Take this new life before it takes yours. Held so tight to my waist, but the smile never stays. Could I change what's within? Break the ground where I said lost in cold, new winds blow, but I fight for my life and don't go where the waves flow. This goes dead once again, cause the only happy end is the one that you carry within. Change has appeared to play its role, so take its hand or it's taking your throat. Don't fight the wave, just feel its force. Take this new life before it takes yours.
When changes come, it's like leaves blowing in the wind till these trees grow them in again. It's like lines flowing out a pen, never knowing how it ends, never knowing what's around the bend. Louder and louder the crowd is shouting, and I couldn't help but notice this whole fucking showbiz thing is kinda bogus. It should be a bonus. Doing what you love has gotta come first. Money second, so I gotta focus on the hocus pocus that my flow is when it's hopeless. Even when it seems like everybody jokes at my expense, it don't make no sense. Like offering a coke head, a couple sodas. Keep my mind open like a lotus. I suppose it's how I wrote this opus, and it's dopest. And now you know it, who's the coldest. All you gotta do is show me where the throne is. Play them like a million locusts. I slay them with the mic and kill opponents, cause it's my moment and I will own it. But I'm begging for a change like I'm still homeless.
Change has appeared to play its role, so take its hand or it's taking your throat. Don't fight the wave, just feel its force. Take this new life before it takes yours.
Emperor's altar. Breaking free of scourge control. Oh, won't allow the Lich King to keep my soul. No, you best believe we ain't evil no more. No, we'll show new allies of the horde. Oh, just look at us now, hardships we undergo. Don't worry, leaders, we won't overthrow. You'll see a side of us you've never known, because we're forsaken now, forsaken now. I'm undead, maggots crawled all over me. I'm undead, you might need some potpourri. I'm undead, where did my skin go? Undead, forsaken now. Undead, forsaken now. Undead, yeah, I'm undead. Oh yeah. Nobody wants to believe we've changed. Hey, we really don't care about what they say. Hey, so what, we've had a past of foul play. Yeah, life doesn't matter when we're dead anyway. Just look at us now, hardships we undergo. Don't worry, leaders, we won't overthrow. You'll see a side of us you've never known, because we're forsaken now, forsaken now. I'm undead, there's no need to be scared of me. I'm undead, brains are a nummy delicacy. From your head you'll be screaming no. Undead, forsaken now. Undead, forsaken now. Undead, ayo, ayo, ayo. Who cares about the living? I'm a dead right now. Ayo, ayo, ayo. You'll be cheering on when alliance goes down. Just look at us now, hardships we undergo. Don't worry, leaders, we won't world's overthrow. You'll see a side of us you've never known, because we're forsaken now, forsaken now. We're undead, they may doubt our loyalty. We're undead, 'cause we give no guarantee. We're undead, death is all we know. We're undead, forsaken. We're undead, forsaken. We're undead. We all love our banshee queen. We're undead, allied brain from my favorite cuisine. We're undead, we'll be screaming for the horde. We're undead, forsaken. We're undead, forsaken. We're undead. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to find our long forgotten gold. The pines were roaring on the heights, the winds were moaning in the night. The fire was red, its flaming spread, the trees like torches blazed with light. The pines were roaring on the heights, the winds were moaning in the night. The fire was red, its flaming spread, the trees like torches blazed with light.
everyone, this is DJ Asclepius, and welcome to Podcasts and Poetry. This is the part of our program where we shine the spotlight on the creative talent in our very own Shroud of the Avatar community. So just sit back and relax for some wonderful stories, poems, and music. Yes, and welcome everyone. It's great to have you here. We've got some wonderful stories for you today, so let's just get right into it. Hello everyone, this is Asclepius with the conclusion of this thrilling story by Althadur, entitled The Darkness in the Forest. Background music by Smart Sound. Chapter 2, The Darkness. It was a joke, a jibe, meant to lighten the atmosphere and the tension my companions felt. There was a short, silent chuckle. I was a scholar and not a warrior. They did not truly expect I would speak to them. I once mentioned that we should try to speak to the kobolds that jealously guard the ore my allies often mine in the Elysium mines. Perhaps the kobolds would prefer to create a trade agreement instead of being slaughtered and slaughtering humans. The laugh from that time was heartfelt, strong, and stinging. My companion's nervous laugh here in the woods was soft, half-hearted. I looked into the sky at the same time the bespectacled kobold did. We saw the stars themselves had given up trying to communicate their desire for us to run, and were beginning to melt in the sky. The sky seemed to be a viscous liquid, and the very stars making trails in them as they slowly slid off the sky. No one spoke. The kobold and I were mesmerized and confused by what we saw above. The others were caught by what they saw on Earth. I have no doubt that it was a creation or abomination of the Obsidians, or perhaps it predated them, or perhaps it even created them, being the very thing that gave power to the Obsidian Eye. It wasn't black. Black is tangible. We could make things black. This was darker, deeper, more cold than any black you could imagine. It drained the light from the dripping, sliding stars, made the torches the kobolds had set alight seem like small dying embers. It even drained the light from our very souls. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, slithering and flowing up from the uncovered idol. It had a form, but was formless, flowing as much as simply being there. It was like a mass of slithering snakes, or a vertical pool of nothingness. I wanted to see it. I wanted to look deep within it. I wanted to use my sight and will to make meaning of it. But I was so utterly afraid that I turned away. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my friends move, being dragged towards it, as if pulled by their bellies. There were screams. Those I will never forget. I still hear them. In the wind as it blows around me here in Ardoris, I hear it. I hear it in the canals, in the trees, in the grass, and in the creak of the houses. The screams were like the screams we hear in our dreams, the screams from ages past that have had their volume lost as they travel countless ages to our sleeping ears. All that is left of these screams is the tremor that tenses our skin and chills us from within. The kobold workers were all gone. I then looked at the thing, enveloped in my own fear and wishing to escape. It looked as if I was peering into a pond as I lay on the shore, but I was standing. Its edges moved like the ocean's tide lapping at the shore. It slowly grew, filling the clearing with its unfathomable darkness. I watched in speechless horror as companions were slowly dragged into it, sending an unnerving black-on-black ripple to its undefined edge as they passed the surface. Timeless screams were filling the clearing and my mind. The learned kobold, the only other living thing in the clearing, began screaming fanatically. It must have been its native tongue, or I simply had no ear for terrestrial words. I did not know what she said. I only heard the soundless screams that came out of time. Something hit me hard in the chest. I was hit by the kobold as she ran past, demanding that I run. "Run, Suman! To stay is worse than death!" I don't remember running. Perhaps I didn't run. I awoke to a cool rain and sunlight. I was laying on my back at the end of a long rain. I was soaked. The final raindrops fell as I awoke, blinking as I watched the sun begin descending in the west. I sat up aching from laying on the ground for a long time. Days, I soon calculated. I was no longer in the Savronok timberlands, or whatever forest I found myself in, but outside, in the plains near the ruins of Midras. The spectral peaks rose to my right. I returned to the timberlands as soon as I could walk. I scoured the area to find evidence of the dig site, but found no evidence whatsoever. What I did find, however, was the bespectacled kobold. This is why I believe it is the Savronok timberlands that this occurred in. The learned kobold was in the northeastern ruins, huddled in a corner, clutching a book. A copy of a book I read in the bookstore in Airy about ancient and powerful magics and artifacts of the Obsidians. She was dead, and had been for days. The colour was drained from her. Her eyes, still open and now glossy, looked upwards towards the sky. I remembered the melting stars, the cold darkness that devoured light, and fell to my knees. I must have run from the dig site. I must have run further than anyone, and in the correct direction. I was the only survivor. I looked at the book the kobold had. It was old, older than the one in the bookstore. It was made with an odd black leather I had never seen before. I reached for it. It was a book after all, but was reminded of the darkness I ran from. I remembered the panicked shrieks from the kobold to dig faster, to reveal whatever was in the ground. I left the book there. I wanted nothing more of it. I had enough. I witnessed something utterly terrifying and beyond thought that night. Whatever it was existed outside our imagination. My cowardice saved me from whatever fate my friends and the kobolds encountered. I am in what I call my home, the Gardens of Ardoris. I am writing down my experiences in the hopes that no one will experience what I have. I have done what I can to obscure the details, to protect you from the darkness beyond dark. If you somehow find the kobold's book, and if you somehow locate the object the kobold and I found that night, I urge you to destroy them, to further obfuscate the knowledge. I could not destroy either. It is not in my nature. And the obsidian idol weighs down my bag every day, waiting for the stellar alignment that will allow its inhabitant to emerge into our world again. And just a reminder, people, we are giving away streamer bundles as part of the show. These are pretty awesome, and best of all, they're free. So all you have to do is get yourself down here to the Avatars Radio Studio, which is in Immortal City, just off the west coast of Mistrander. It's the building right next to the Tesla Tower. Get up to the top floor and open up a trade window with a lead dragonfire, and you will receive a free streamer bundle. There you go. How's that for good fun and value?
Good afternoon.
Good evening. And good morning.
This is Sid, and your ether amplifiers are tuned to
Avatars Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Asclepius with another great story from Algarian de Kali. It is entitled The Destruction of Kali. Background music is by Smart Sound. In the year following the cataclysm, on Sunandai, the 1st of Janus, the month of Daedalus, the chilling season of Wentru, in the waking dawn, a location was destroyed. Pale-robed sorcerers, both venerable and youthful, joined anxious hands, alternating old, then young, adept, then novice, in a circle of 30 that surrounded a deep blue, pulsating lunar rift. The entirety of the Order of the White Cabal stood stalwart in solemn meditation, focused desperately upon the final hope for the city of Kali. A spell of immense proportions was called upon. With each word of magic uttered, the weave of the enchantment grew. With every misspoken syllable, the magical energies trembled as if to burst. But few mistakes were made, for the Order of the White Cabal were learned in the arts of magic. Every breath of their lives was exhausted in devotion to such studies, and their destiny was now full at hand. When one singer of spells misspoke, the neighbouring mage would repeat the words in proper enunciation, repairing the ethereal threads nearly lost or wrongly woven. But sometimes even the most perfectly spoken syllable caused falter. As the moons broke apart, words of magic broke with them. Once powerful incantations seemingly became fruitless whispers of nothingness. As each focused minute passed, the rift grew brighter, yet more turbulent. But as each mage spoke their turn, and as the turns passed from old to young, young to old, there was one whose time was quickly approaching, who dared to stare into the sky upon their impending doom. This day had been foreseen. Magic of immense power would be summoned by the Order. They would draw upon the fickle energies of a lunar rift at the outskirts of Kali. They would harness this power to extend a protective shield over the city, safeguarding all within, saving the citizens, the grand repository, and the caverns of the Cabal far beneath their feet. The vision from the Overseer gave them only days to prepare. The entirety of the Cabal were put to task, learning the enchantments which would be recited upon this fateful day. Even the youngest of neophytes were given many lines to rehearse and commit to memory. As his neighbour's enchantments were recited, the turn passed to Kala Shari Dakali, a young but promising member of the White Cabal. But Kala Shari did not speak. The young mage still stared upon the despair in the darkening sky above. The dooming silence caused the magical energies to buckle and sway. Crackles of lightning flickered throughout the circle of mages, the circle of stones. An odd calm took hold in the eyes of Kala Shari Dakali, grandson to Marquis Elgarian Dakali. The decrepit Elgarian squeezed his grandson's hand in hurried alarm with the quivering voice of an old man. "Kala, your words! Your words! Recite them now!" Kala tore his eyes away from the rain of shards and cast a baleful and resentful glare upon the unsuspecting, then yanked his hands from the circle. To the dread and surprise of all, a sinister sneer formed upon the young man's lips. "I shall do no such thing." Kala Shari strode defiantly into the darkness of the surrounding woods. "May Larminius take you all," he cursed from the shadow in a disdainful voice. Drenching rain and bruising hail pelted down upon their soaked velvet robes and frigid skin. Scholarly men, accustomed to dusty libraries and solitary study, were assaulted by the cataclysmic winds. Flustered and desperate, Elgarian grasped outward to the other empty hand, to the most elder of his order, Galdarine the White. But before they could complete the circle, the spell collapsed, and the rift began to swirl in an immense burst of blue energy. Many of the mages turned to Elgarian with panic or blame in their eyes. Tendrils of furious lightning blasted outwards in all directions from the torrent of the portal. Each mage struck was sucked into the vortex. More streaks flashed outward, each finding something to tear away from this plane. Stones from the circle vanished in a bending of space, pulled into the void. Mages once numbering 30, now only half as many remained. Some ran from the circle of stones, but the flashes of light plucked them away, pulling them into the ever-darkening portal. Once vibrant blue, now the rift took on a blackness which was nauseating to behold. Elgarian was captivated by the horror, betrayed by his offspring's son. The end of the world was apparent as the shattered moons rained down a terrible fury. Could the avatars save them from this calamity? Were they the cause? Kali's plan for survival was lost. Even before the first shard struck the lands of Kali, the torn rift, now opened into an unknown darkness, was pulling in more and more, starving for all which the surrounding lands could provide. Stones, trees, buildings, spires, men, women, and children. The tendrils showed no mercy as they stripped away all which surrounded the tear in space, save Elgarian, who still stood awestruck. As the rift's turbulence lessened, the crackling energies waned. A moment passed in which only the sound of the storm could be heard. Eerie wind danced about Elgarian's rain-drenched robes as he looked upon the devastation and the diminished opening, now nearly shut. A moment of acceptance and clarity came to the old sorcerer. What had transpired finally took toll upon him, and Elgarian became overwhelmed with emotion. The white mage cried in desperation, tears of agony mixing with the rain upon his wrinkled cheek. Just as Elgarian raised his eyes to meet the shardfall, a final accusing finger of lightning struck him, pulling him into the void and tearing him from this reality. The portal slammed shut just as the shards made landfall, laying waste to all that remained of the once vibrant city of Kali. In unfathomable time, hours, perhaps years, minutes, or millennia, the peoples of Kali roamed the void in sickening despair. Perception of time or space no longer possible to them. Darkness consumed all. By touch alone could they move about, all sounds muffled, distorted, or deafening. The ground beneath their feet shifting with mocking and confusing intent. But all was not lost, for deep within the dark, a solitary glow emitted from a beautiful form. Hope had survived, a beacon that would not be discovered for centuries to come. For the sapling, which grew from the blessed essence of the white acolyte of Artenius, was now a mighty tree, many millennia old. For so long, the Devout One had protected the citizens of Kali under its umbrella of radiance and warmth. Now, it stood waiting within the void, waiting for an old man in his aimless wandering through the maddening blackness to step into its light.
Hey listeners, I'm Allie Dragonfire, your host of Avatars Radio's electronic dance music show, The Beat of Novia, on Friday nights. If you would like to host my show on your dance floor or other kind of venue, contact me via Discord today.
Okay, now we have some music coming up, and following the music we have the next chapter of the Stone Dragon series. This is chapter 6 of book 2. Now, fair warning, as we approach the end of book 2, the chapters are getting longer, which means you have to listen to somebody droning on for a long time. Oh dear, but give a thought to the people who actually record it. Okay, now, if you wish to, or if you need to have a bathroom break, or you want to go and get something to drink or to nibble while you listen to this, it's probably a good time to do it now, because the next chapter is going to take about 45 minutes of your time. It is worth it though. It's a great story. Here we go with Emerald by Mordecai Seraphim. The Stone Dragon series by Lily Bird, detailing her adventures with her companions in this new land of Novia. Chapter 6, At Jade Island. All aboard. Yesterday morning, back in Jade Valley, while focusing on the driving need to catch up with Violet's ship, Cyrena had eventually convinced herself to get on board this airship. She had persuaded herself that she could get in the air again, even if it brought her to a cold sweat at the mere idea of leaving the safety of the earth. She was determined to overcome her dread. Airships didn't crash every time, and when Lucy looked her in the eye and bet her farm that this one would not crash, Cyrena took a deep breath and accepted her ticket. She knew she would do whatever she needed to do to see this search to the end. She was counting on Lucy's opinion of this bloody contraption and her love of her farm. She was still not sure it was a sound choice, but there was also her promise to help her friend find Kitty. And then there was the book. She had not forgotten. Finding Kitty, and then Torgin and Phlebas, was all absolutely essential because of the book they all sought. It had caused far too much damage in the world already, and Cyrena would do far more to see it recovered than simply lose her breakfast over the edge of an airship. Her hope that Phlebas would find a way to safely keep or destroy it kept her steady. She knew he would not give up, and she would not either. She knew what she had to do, and she was determined to do it. It would be nice if it didn't involve quite so much nausea, though. Cyrena closed her eyes, trying to stop the inner swells from swamping her. Glancing up from the rail, the big oval balloon billowing above did not dispense the same sense of comfort to her as most of the others felt. In fact, its undulating form was now a catalyst to the rippling inside her stomach. Cyrena leaned over the rail of the airship again. Hanging on to the thick rope rigging with all her strength, she emptied the contents of her gut yet another time. Relief was immediate. Complete emptiness and freedom for a few precious minutes, until the waves of nausea would once again entirely swamp her existence. This short reprieve was all that kept her from flinging herself over the side too. A fresh breeze on her face rejuvenated her failing spirit, and she pulled herself from the brink. Back in their shared sleeping cabin, she carefully rinsed her mouth and washed her face before climbing into her cot after a large swig of the cool peppermint tea that Lucy had left in a pewter jug beside her bed. Cyrena suspected that Lucy was responsible for the hot water and clean towel as well. She smiled a little, thankful for her friend's compassion. Lucy continued to bring her sense of serenity and comfort with her, no matter where they wandered or how rough the accommodation. And Cyrena was keenly aware of all the ways that Lucy smoothed the path for everyone in their small troop. Watching people was a specialty of Cyrena's. She noticed things that other people were not aware of, like the way that Lily seemed to go completely still every time that Torgin's name came up in conversation, or the things that Lucy left behind her, like a breadcrumb trail back to the beginning. Cyrena shifted in her bunk, pulling the rough blanket up under her chin. Days into our journey, I leaned far over the side and shouted gleefully into the wind, "Whee!" My hair whipped back from my face, and the warm sun soaked right through my closed eyelids to shine bright orange patterns where they danced in my mind. I was having a moment of complete abandon. There was little I could accomplish while we travelled, so as well as writing copious notes, I spent time exploring the ship. The ride up to the large airship in the small air balloon from Jade Valley was the smoothest transfer I had experienced. At least I hadn't screamed the entire time this time. After the air balloon docked, and we climbed into the airship. The first officer arranged for payment and transferred our belongings over to the ship too. This was all becoming familiar to me. However, the beauty of the long-range airship had not struck me before today. I think fear had made me blind to the splendour around me. I looked around deck at the graceful lines of polished wood and thick rope. This bigger air vessel gave me a strange sense of stability and permanence. These days, Zyrina mostly stayed in her bunk. Lucy had made friends with the crew and was leading some sort of group on first aid on a sailing vessel, and I apparently was not allowed very many places on board. The crew moved around me almost invisibly when they didn't want my attention. If they did want my attention, they were very clear too. Generally it was, "Get off that," or "Miss, you aren't allowed up here," and my favourite, "How did you manage to do that?" However, I did make friends with someone. The engineer, who was bemused by my interest and horror, enjoyed some company nonetheless. Passengers didn't often pay attention to the mechanics of the flight, and he had a chance to talk about the machines he loved and the land we were traversing. That was rare for him, although he was quite knowledgeable. He was a quick-witted fellow and didn't mind talking about his work, and especially about this airship, which I think he never left. At all. He gave a few good lectures while we travelled north. I learned more about the geography of Novia and about the planets in the sky than I had in decades back home. Central Brittany was a glowing jewel in the night as we floated above it. Novia was simply stunning from the sky. Even Zyrina had to admit the views were amazing. Between puking sessions, that is. I think both of us benefited from the discussion on safety measures in case something went wrong with the air heating device. The balloons that we used to get up to the airships carried passengers back to the ground as well. I learned that the large airships rarely land, but traverse the entirety of the world in the air above, and were truly a sight to behold. If I could get over this dratted fear of heights, this experience would be a far more pleasant one. But even so, not letting into fear was a useful thing to learn how to do, and I was determined to overcome this one. It did give me a great deal of comfort when I found out there were air balloons that could be deployed if something went wrong. Though it wasn't till after I was able to inspect one and know how to deploy it myself that I truly felt like I was flying and not just waiting to die. Almost 2 weeks later, we 3 weary travellers jumped down from the small air balloon that delivered us to the ground from the airship. After our luggage was heaved over the side and my feet landed on ground, my knees buckled and I nearly fell over. I looked over at Lucy, who had been the first of us to stand, and then managed to gather up her belongings. She was steady on her feet and already examining one of the weeds growing from the edge of the stone platform we landed on. As soon as I could stand without tilting from side to side, I gave a thank you wave to the balloon pilot, who took off again almost immediately to catch back up with the ship, as there were no passengers waiting to get on board. I was unsteady, but assured myself that I just needed to regain my land legs. It had been an exceedingly long air trip from Jade Valley to Jade Island. It was one that Lucy and I both found exhilarating, though this was not so for all the members of our travelling party. I gave a sympathetic glance toward Zyrina, who had fallen to her knees when we landed, and not yet risen. After covertly checking on my still green friend, I gathered up my belongings and started looking around the dock a little. Ahead of me, and now staring into the harbour, Lucy wondered aloud, "Is that the seabird?" I looked out into the bay. Nope, that looks like a passenger ship. I squinted into the sun to see the outline of the ship that Lucy was pointing out and said, "Violet's ship is smaller, a galleon, and has a pirate flag." I turned to look straight at Lucy, Weren't you just on board recently? Lucy nodded. Maybe my eyes are worse than yours, she shrugged. I didn't pay attention really, and I didn't notice the flag colours. She mused without thinking. Do you think that her sea ship is faster than the airship we took? Do you think they are docked here already? Snails and anthills are faster travel than airships, mumbled Zarina, as she stared hard at a patch of dirt just in front of her. That is the last time I fly, she swore with vehemence. Zarina did not prefer air travel nor sea travel. She preferred walking or wagon or riding horses. She had been airsick or seasick almost the entire journey and was the most grateful person in Novia the moment her boots touched the soil again. She didn't kneel down and thank the Titans out loud, but she definitely did that in her head while on her knees. I sighed and confessed, Rena, I won't make you do it again. Promise. We'll travel by land if we can from now on. Promise. Pinky promise. Zarina nodded once, mollified. It was all she could manage without nausea swelling up again. There was extraordinarily little that would make Zarina continue to do something she didn't want to do. It said a great deal about her feelings for us, that she had even got into the air machine in the first place. It also indicated how serious was the mission for recovering the book we sought. I thought to myself, this could get a lot worse than it's been. I was scanning the horizon looking for my sister's ship, but of course I could not find it among the motley group of ships and tubs in the vicinity. Jade Island's proximity to the large Kingsport harbour on the Hidden Vale made it an attractive spot to anchor the variety of not quite respectable ships that shared the shipping lanes with the bigger passenger ships, so there were quite a few to search. Violet loved Jade Island and often came here to enjoy the company of the local craftsman at his beachside resort. She called him Oz, and he was a fine craftsman of weapons and garments, and especially of musical instruments. Years ago, he had crafted me a lovely harp that had the deep, rich tone that I still preferred over all others. Over the years, I had gotten to know him as well. If he were entertained, you could hear his laugh from across the bay. He kept his shop near the beach. Violet traded with him regularly, but that's not where I was heading now. I looked carefully through the ships again, to be sure I hadn't missed seeing my sister's ship. Well, that's it. We are going to have to find the harbour master. I sounded tired but undefeated. Because I can't see her ship here anywhere. Maybe it's moored farther away. She doesn't generally put down an anchor at the main dock. Something about secrecy, privacy, or piracy, or something like that. Lucy chuckled at that comment. I brightened up. There are also a few surrounding smaller islands. I looked around again. She may be anchored at one of those. I don't remember the last time I travelled here on her ship or where it was that we dropped the anchor. It was years ago, I added, seeing the looks on my friends' faces. I just hope the seabird is still here. Lucy was munching on a piece of bread and cheese and mumbled her comment under her breath, hoping that no one heard her. We need to find Green's Inch, Lucy reminded me. Oh yeah, that's right, I nodded. Zarina gestured with a nod of her head behind them. There was a town crier standing chatting with someone on the pier nearby. She pulled herself to a standing position from her knees, brushed herself off, and didn't lose her stomach contents. This was improvement. Picking up her backpack with a graceful, arching move, she spoke over her shoulder. If anyone knows, that town crier will be the one who does. Her voice trailed behind her as she strode toward the crier. We scrambled to gather our things and follow her over to our only real hope of finding Violet's ship in this maze of islands and secret coves. "Hello there, good sir," she interrupted the pair on the pier. "Can you tell us if a Captain Violet Green has registered a ship at the harbour here?" Lucy and I heard the tail end of Zarina's polite request as we stopped nearby. Let me see. Could it be registered under another name by any chance?" He made a pointed glance to his empty palm held surreptitiously by his side. Zarina looked at me and raised her eyebrow. I fished in my purse and covertly offered him a few gold coins. He felt their weight, then continued, "It could be listed under any of the crew members depending on who paid the docking fee." Stepping forward, I spoke up. "Try searching for Jenny Hawkins, or Aslan Grad, or Purser Scallywag, or Mr. Flint, or—" Here I trailed off as the town crier had started nodding his head. "Ah, here it is." He shifted his weight from one leg to the other and turned to look toward the water. "Let's see. If you go to the end of that pier, beside the Viking longboat, you will find a small rowboat." He pointed at the pier on the right as we faced the sea. "You can take that ferry out to Green's Inch, where Captain Violet likes to dock." "Aha!" Lucy clapped her hands together and startled the town crier. He looked at the three travel-worn women up and down. "As long as you bring it back. Row out to the small island, just past the spit of land you see there." He nodded out past the docks, past the resort on the beach, to a rocky jut of a peninsula, with a few palm trees sprouting out of it like hair. With this, he pocketed the gold that I had given, and turned away from the travellers back to his companion on the dock. "Now we are getting somewhere," I spoke, as I started moving toward the small rowboat. It looked a little unsteady, but we climbed in anyway, and tucked our gear under the oilskin at our feet before we headed out to sea. Lucy took up the oars and began singing, "Row, row, row your boat." There were several groans, but in the end even Zarina chimed in with her rich contralto. It helped pass the time too, and we soon spotted the outline of a ship in the distance. "Yes, it's the Seabird!" My excitement nearly overturned the boat as I jumped to my feet. "Sit down, you fool!" Lucy didn't mince her words as she kept pulling on the oars, and her strong, even strokes drew us closer and closer. I gave her an annoyed look, but sat back down all the same. The ship did not look like it was planning on going anywhere. The anchor was down, and there were no crew members immediately visible as they got close enough to make out the name of the ship on its bow spelled out in runes. "Ahoy there, permission to come aboard?" I called out in a clear voice as we approached the private dock. Violet's ship looked deserted to me, but I could see someone reading a book on the dock. It looked like Violet's purser, Scallywag. Scallywag looked up from her well-used dog-eared novel and scoffed. "Like you need permission to come on board your sister's ship. Welcome, Lily. Who are your friends?" She looked the other two up and down, and then set her book down on the crate near the chair she had brought from the ship to sit on. It was hot and tiring when supplies were being loaded, and boring when they weren't, but the sturdy chair made the entire process of being purser much more pleasant for her old bones. "Harriet Scallywag, meet Zarina, and you have met Lucy Featherbright before." I nodded to each woman as I introduced them, and they each ducked their heads in greeting. Well, there is room now if you want passage. Earlier on this voyage there was a full passenger list out of Mistrandur, but they have all found their ports. There was even a lynx on board, and a mage who hired the private room, but he left the ship at—" She trailed off, seeing all three of them go still and quiet. "Etida? Kitty? What?" Bursting out all at once rendered us incomprehensible and loud, but Harriet was used to drunken sailors talking, and this was similar. "That's enough now, one by one. You first. She pointed squarely at me. Having grasped that we were looking for the lynx, she nodded. Yep, that big cat got off at the same place that Aslan the cook debarked. Was Kitty with Aslan? Exeter? Then where? The next round of questions was harder for old Scallywag to ungarble. She glared at me. In the end, the other women calmed down and let me do the talking, but I could feel their impatience. Harriet, do you know why the lynx left the ship? Harriet seemed relieved to only have one woman asking questions. Yep, it jumped ship after Aslan, and Jenny left, along with that mage. Can't recall his name. In Exeter. That lynx looked like it was following them, she added, but none of them was going to Exeter. Leastwise, I don't think so. Here she looked a little unsure. Do you know where they were going? I pushed. Well, let's see now. Harriet scratched her forehead and tossed her grey hair out of her face. She was just warming up to her subject. Captain Violet sent Aslan to accompany Jenny to her parents' inn in Darkshire, the Bent Bow Inn, I think it's called. She shook her head sadly. Jenny has quit the sailing life and is going back to being a landlubber. I'll miss that quick laugh of hers, but she had a heap of trouble on her first voyage, and I think it made her skittish. Harriet mused, then added with more gusto. Then Aslan is going fishing at some fancy fishing place before travelling north, and stopping in at a restaurant in Odanus Mortis, rumoured to have the best phoenix bites anywhere. I think she's trying to get the recipe. Then off to Stinging Tree Hollow to visit a friend of hers, some cook or other. There is some sort of fish recipe they are working on together. The captain is going to meet Aslan in Stinging Tree Hollow before coming here to meet up with us. Then we sail back to the Mistrander. That mage was on his way somewhere in the desert beyond. He's accompanying Aslan and Jenny to Darkshire on his way, wherever he is going. She then confided to Lily in a half-whisper, Our Aslan is sweet on the mage, but I never did catch his name. He was an odd fellow, all right. Not right in the head, I don't think. Muttered to himself all the time, but nary a word to another living soul except our Aslan. Here she nodded agreement with herself. Didn't talk much, but at least he decided to travel with Aslan and Jenny. There's safety in numbers travelling through Novia by foot. She nodded to herself. Harriet had heard tales of travel on land. She avoided touching land herself if she could manage it. Never felt safe there, and that's the truth. She nodded suspiciously towards the shore. I looked toward my friends with a definite slump in my shoulders. They aren't here. I was resigned. But Lily, we know where Aslan is going to be. Kitty is bound to be near, or she will know where Kitty stopped following her at the very least. We just need to travel to the places she hasn't reached yet, Zorina reminded me. Stinging Tree Hollow, then to Odanus Mortis, and Darkshire Hills. We will find her if we work our way south. We are bound to come across her either on the road along the way or at one of the locations that Scallywag just gave us. It sounds like Aslan must be aware of Kitty following her and knows something about Kitty too, or at least Kitty is following her. Stinging Tree Hollow is not far from where we are now. Zorina turned back to Scallywag. Can you tell us any more about the mage? Here, Lucy and I both perked up to listen again. Well, let's see. Harriet seemed to ponder thoughtfully for a short time. He weren't a talker, that's for sure. He was on board since Mistrander, and I think the only person he ever spoke with was our Aslan. She nursed him back to health during the voyage, you know. That can bond a pair, sure as the surf. He's a landlubber. No sea legs on him, even after all that time on the ocean. She shook her head. More came out of him than went in. I've never seen the beat of it afore. I looked over to Zorina, who shuddered in sympathy, having intimate knowledge of the process that Scallywag described. She went on. Then there was that big white cat, Kitty you call it. Well, Kitty kept a close watch on that mage on the ship for the whole voyage, that it leaped off the deck at Exeter with the others. Most of us gave both of them a wide berth. Kitty kept the rat population down on the ship, though, and Aslan surely was thankful for that. I think she gave it extra rations when no one was looking. Not sure why the cat was so fascinated by that mage. He weren't good at the magic, that's certain. Here she rolled up her sleeve to show a healing spell he had put on a wound that Scallywag had gotten while climbing the rigging a week past. It was slowly healing, but her skin was discoloured and bent the wrong way somehow, and it looked a little swollen around the edges. Lucy gasped, then stepped forward and quickly took Harriet's arm in her two strong hands, and with a swiftly spoken healing spell, Asenrino, she soon mended Harriet's botched wound. The relief in Harriet's face was immediate. Lucy did such a good job that Harriet could not now even tell she had ever been damaged. "Why, thank you, Miss Lucy. You have some mighty powerful magic there. That there is a gift from the Titans, mark my words." Then she went on, but appeared almost lost in memories. I wish that mage was as competent. He messed up most of the spells he tried, and one night we even had to put down a fire in his room. Then there was the main sail fire. Gadzooks, that was a night all right. She grimaced a little and nervously laughed. Fire on a ship is about the worst mistake you can make out on the ocean, and not something sailors get over. Fool mage. Tried some magic spell out of that little book he carried. There was some nasty screeching sounds, and it felt like the world was being ripped apart. She shrugged, but whatever it was, it didn't take, and sparks flew every which way. Jenny said there was spider silk all over the Major's room when she went to swab it and change his bedding the next day. It was a mess to clean up, sticky and strong webbing too. That's about all I know. You can try asking old John Sliver, the cook's assistant we picked up somewhere in the Mistrandur. He took over cooking while our Aslan is on shore leave. All I can say about that is I sure feel the loss of Miss Aslan's cooking, and I look forward to her coming back and making fish stew again. With this, she trailed off while staring into the water below the dock. Zyrina sighed. "Thank you kindly for all the information. Where is old John Sliver?" "He's on board somewhere. Try the galley." She waved them away and went back to reading the novel in her lap. I thanked Scallywag, and we headed to the ladder on the dock. Lucy led the way up to Jacob's ladder and jumped lightly into the ship. There was no one about. Rena and I were close behind her, and we fanned out, searching for the cook. Lucy found him in the belly of the ship, swabbing the floor, and called out to Zarina and me to come down. I jumped down the ladder and was met by the enormous, solid form of a giant man. "Ahoy!" I stammered, looking at the massive girth of the cook. "I'm Lily Bird, Captain Violet Green's sister." Old John Sliver looked furtively around and saw no escape. "I didn't take 'em," he blurted, then added, "I'm called Salty John around here." "Take what?" I inquired innocently. "Why Salty John?" Lucy added. "Oh well, never mind then." The cook looked relieved, then nodded toward Lucy. "It's on account of the accident I had with a block of salt and the fish soup on the first day I took over cook's spot, miss." I exchanged meaningful looks with Zyrina. I went on. "My friends and I are looking for a snowy lynx, the one that was on board until Exeter, and any information you have about the mage who booked the guest cabin. Can you help us?" "Mage, huh?" The cook tried to look nonchalant. "There was a mage on board?" "You better start at the beginning," Zyrina encouraged, stepping forward with her bow notched and steel in her liquid brown eyes. "What didn't you take?" Instinctively backing up a step, the cook didn't waste a minute, and in his extensive rambling we found out some interesting bits tucked into the myriad of ship's gossip. We learned there were several dragon eggs on board in a secret room. They belonged to the captain. 2 went missing in Ardoris, and the cook was worried that someone would think he had taken them. He swore he didn't. "I was just dusting them when I noticed some missing." Or so he claimed. I narrowed my eyes and said in a quiet voice, "How did you know some were missing if you hadn't found them before you were dusting?" There were 2 missing. His big brown eyes blinked quickly, but he could not look less innocent as he went on. "I looked all around the ship. They're nowhere." He sounded guilty. "You can tell Captain Violet it wasn't me." Here he narrowed his eyes. "I bet it was that mage." "Why do you say that?" I wanted to know, already half sure the cook had the dragon egg hidden somewhere. "Well, he was a sneaky fella, that scurvy dog, poking his nose every which way. Always with that book of his. Never managed a proper spell the whole time he was here, and set fire to his room to boot." Stroking his chin, he went on, "He had plenty of time to steal 'em and hide 'em in his baggage before he left the ship." "Sneaky?" "Yep. I spied him looking through the captain's desk. And another thing, he just didn't seem to be much like anyone else. He didn't mix with anyone on the ship except the cook who hired me on, Aslan Grad. Somehow he got in her good books, and they spent a lot of time on the aft deck whispering to each other. Aslan was sunk, spent all her time sighing and staring into space. When she and Jenny left the ship, the mage tagged along with them. It didn't seem right somehow, but who am I to know?" He shrugged. "Just as long as you all know it weren't me who stole those eggs, savvy?" Missing dragon's eggs and a mage with a magic book. It didn't take a genius to put 2 and 2 together. This had become instantly far more interesting to Irena, and Lucy, and me. "Thank you, John. When did you notice the eggs were gone?" I asked politely. Cookie John shifted his eyes from side to side as he answered, "Oh, that would be some time after we docked at Arteris, because when we docked here at Green's Inch is when I discovered it gone. After the captain went off to find them black oysters, that is. I didn't mean to find the secret storage room, but since Jenny were talking about it, and what might be inside, I decided that I'd look for it when I was swabbing the sleeping quarters." He looked furtively towards the rear end of the crew quarters. I knew where the secret room was located, but didn't want to go snooping in my sister's private treasures just then. Besides, I didn't know what was supposed to be in there, but I would tell Scallywag before we left about Salty John's tale. I asked, "Do you know where the mage is now?" He shrugged. "Nope. He hopped ashore at Exeter with Aslan and Jenny, and good riddance. He was never healthy, and caught the ship on fire more than once." He grunted. "They were planning on taking the road up to Darkshire Hills, as far as I know. Aslan took Jenny home, then she was ordered to take some shore leave, and said she'd go to Stinging Tree Hollow on her way back. We are here in dock until she makes her way up here before we head back on our route. No one expects her to arrive for a fortnight. Did you see her anywhere in your travels?" "No, but we are looking for a snowy lynx named Kitty." Lucy was not going to give anything away to this greasy bear of a man. He didn't seem all that trustworthy to her. She stood directly in front of him and crossed her arms in front of her chest while she asked, "Do you know where the snowy lynx is?" Old Salty John took a step back, then gave a quizzical look, almost whispering while he answered Lucy. "That was another strange thing. That cat really took its eyes off that mage. The cat sneaked off the ship just after Aslan, Jenny and the mage debarked at Exeter. I think it's tracking the mage from what I can tell." He seemed relieved. I nodded to the other 2, and we all thanked the cook politely and left him leaning on his mop beside a pail while we climbed the ladder back to the galley. In the kitchen, at the captain's table, we huddled together to drink the tea and try the cakes that Salty John put there for tea. They did not look fresh. It was time to make a new plan. But first, the food. Lucy dug right in and soon had a heaping platter of cakes and cookies and pies in front of her, and I wasn't far behind. There were lemon buns, irresistible ones. Rena took a cup of tea, but avoided the sweets. I didn't notice really, because she rarely ate dessert. Lucy summed up as her hand hovered over the tray of squares again. So this fellow keeps showing up in all the places we're interested in. It looks like Kitty is intent on following him, and Aslan is googly-eyed over him, right? I'm getting more and more interested in him and in his little book. Rena, do you think it's that book? She turned to see Zorena's neutral expression. And what about those missing dragon eggs? You don't think he's going to try to control another dragon? Zorena paled and then frowned before answering. Phlebas would know for sure, but it's sure starting to look like it might be. I wonder what clue Torgin has followed. Right now, I think we need to take a look and see if we can find Aslan. We need to learn more about this mage. Zorena seemed sure. I agreed. Lucy simply gathered up their snack and put it all away in her picnic basket, ready to travel again. Her smile told the world that all was right again since her belly was full. Nothing seemed to interfere with her good mood, even though we had travelled the length of the land and still hadn't found Kitty. I'm just going to take a quick look around the room that mage was using before we leave, I shouted over the sound of the wind. I'll catch up in a minute. Meet you at the rowboat? Rena nodded as she climbed down to the dock after Lucy. First, I climbed the ladder to my sister's private rooms. I left my quickly scribbled paper on her desk where she would find it. Scallywag had told me she was out looking for oysters along the shore somewhere, but I didn't really have time to go and try to find her. Dear Vi, I can't stay and wait for you, but I wanted to let you know I had been here. I finally caught up with your ship after a very long airship ride all the way north through Novia with Zorena and Lucy. Remember them? It was magnificent. We are searching for Lucy's cat and have gotten the message that Kitty left your ship at Exeter. We are heading out to try to find Aslan. Maybe she knows where Kitty has gone. Scallywag says you are off looking for pearls somewhere nearby, but I don't have time to try to find you. I'll catch you up with this latest adventure when you come back through Jade Valley. I know you will be back for the annual family gathering up at the keep. I'll be sure to keep the light on for you. Don't be late. Love, Lil. P.S. The seabird looks amazing. That new varnish is the perfect shade, just like you thought it would be. P.P.S. John Sliver snuck in your treasury. He knows 2 dragons' eggs are missing. I don't trust him. With that done, I headed back down the ladder and over to the fancy guest room. This was the room I usually got to use when I sailed with my sister, and I knew it well. It was left in a semi-tidy condition, but I wouldn't trust that the bedding was fresh. I always brought my own when I sailed on the Seabird. I gave it a quick sniff to confirm. Yes, I was correct. I shook my head to clear it and started rifling through the small desk in the room. There was a little mess left in the cabin, and no one else had booked the room after the mage. I checked with Scallywag on that, but he had not left a lot behind. No one had bothered to clean it up yet because there wasn't a booking. Why clean an empty room? Although I could see some logic in that, I was mostly only glad no one had touched anything in there. Spider webbing was still evident in the room, and there were several papers beside the bed. Also, some kind of strangely coloured charcoal in the bottom of the waste bin in the corner of the room with charred papers. So, here I was, going through the garbage on my sister's ship again. I did also look under the mattress and under the bed and all the usual hiding places. Nothing there. I had to giggle a little. Nerves, I think. But at last I did find some interesting bits of crumpled paper in the small desk in his room. One of them was an advertisement for the Pickled Spinster Bed and Breakfast in Singing Tree Hollow. Someone had underlined the name several times and put stars in the margins around it. Now, why would the mage be going to Stinging Tree Hollow? If Aslan was going there, and the mage then, obviously, that was absolutely our next stop. Rena had guessed right. I had a friend with a bakery in that town. Maybe she would have heard something about these mages and miscreants who moved far too secretly around Novia. There was also one for a restaurant in a town called Ordanus Mortis, and it had the same underlining and little stars all around it. Los Gardenias Restaurant and the name Nesta doodled a few times in the margin. The last advertisement had Darkshire scrawled across the top in big square runes, Hawkins, Bent Bow Inn written on it in the same runic language. And at the bottom, with a question mark after it in everyday Novian, Southern Red Branch, Nesta. Just a name. Well, most of this wasn't news, since I already knew that Aslan had been heading for Darkshire. Though Nesta had no meaning for me, I did wonder who that was. Was it the Major's name? Then I found a piece of paper that had been torn into pieces. It took me a few seconds to discover that there were 6 pieces of paper, and that I could piece them back together. I carefully laid out the pieces in order and read, "To the nameless Mage H of the Southern Red Branch that I met in Laketown at the dock. Soon after you left, there was a few men in black asking after you. 3 of them. I heard them talking about a meeting with Nesta, and Nesta not happy that they had not found you yet. I didn't tell them where you was going though. They seemed none too friendly. There were 3 women who sounded interested in you too, but they was looking for a cat. That about covers the gold you paid me to keep you informed. We is even now, and my debt paid in full too. Thanks for doing business. Finn Biana." "That conniving scamp!" I exclaimed. How Finn managed to get a letter to the mage before he left the ship at Exeter boggled my mind. It certainly arrived before we did. Then I realised why Finn had been so nervous around us and unwilling to be found in the first place. He'd been questioned before we arrived in Ironhall. I had to tell the others. No wonder Lucy didn't trust him. He was double-dealing. I guess business is business, but I sure could not stomach the idea of Finn passing on information about any of my friends or me. Gathering up these pamphlets and scraps of paper, I took another look around the room, and, as nothing else had any special markings that I could see, I didn't bother taking anything more. Showing Zyrina and Lucy when I joined them, Zyrina narrowed her eyes and nodded somberly. "Stinging Hollow's not even a day's ride from Kingsport. We can stop there for a rest and have a look around." She pointed at the pamphlet for the Pickled Spinster laid on my lap. After thinking for a minute, she added, "I think Ordanus Mortis is further south in Novia, south of central Brittany. We will go there after Stinging Tree Hollow if we don't find Aslan tomorrow. That's the restaurant that Lily was telling you about yesterday, Lucy." "Oh?" Lucy nodded, looking more interested. "And I know a pretty amazing baker who lives in Stinging Tree Hollow too," I threw in, hoping to entice Lucy to want to carry on past Kingsport today. "She is one of the best fighters I've had the pleasure to go adventuring with, but—" I paused, looking at my friends. Maybe those are stories for a different afternoon. "Oh good, a baker and an adventurer?" Lucy joined in after coming closer. "I'm hungry." She gracefully stepped her large form into the rowboat and had herself settled without even causing a ripple in the water. I watched her pick up the oars and place them in the locks with such ease and familiarity that I wondered where and when she had learned to be so comfortable on the water in such a small vessel, but could see from the look on her face that she was not interested in my questions, even a little bit. "Come on. I don't want to wait until we get all the way to Ordanus Mortis before we eat, either. Let's go. Stinging Hollow, you say?" I stuck all the papers into my belongings and gently began to nudge my way into the rowboat. No, Stinging Tree Hollow. It's because of the kind of nettles around that town. They have barbs, and once they puncture your skin, they release something that burns to the very core of your body. We don't want to get stung there. Zyrina rubbed her shins in memory as she spoke. After Lucy's harsh words last time I rocked the boat, I wasn't about to do it again, and almost succeeded. We didn't tip over, at least. With that, we left the Seabird, rowed back to Jade Island's main dock in the rickety rowboat, this time loudly singing dirty sea shanties all the way back, then took the ferry from Jade Island to the dock in Kingsport. In the end, it was too late in the day to continue to Stinging Tree Hollow, and we found lodgings for the night in the port city. Early the next morning from the old city, we made our way on the south route, staying east of the Ravenswood forests. None of us wanted to tangle with the Shadowwood. By the time we had reached Stinging Tree Hollow, all three of us were ready to collapse. I pointed to the sign ahead. Stinging Tree Hollow, it said. Ye olde pickled spinster, it said. I don't know much about Ye olde pickled spinster, though I've stayed there a few times on my way through this part of the Hidden Vale in the past. And I showed them the pamphlet again. Let's keep our wits about us while we go in. Ask if they have seen any mages around town. Yeah, that sounds like something we can do. Walk into a strange inn and demand to know if there are mages of questionable virtue about the place. That doesn't sound sane. So Irina had another idea. Let's just stick to some general sort of questions, nothing too specific. See if anyone knows more than they should. How will we know if they know what they shouldn't know? Lucy was in earnest, but the tension had got the best of me. I admit I started giggling then and couldn't stop. Yep, it's time for a break, Irina agreed, rolling her eyes and laughing. Lucy just nodded her tired head and turned to go down the trail toward town without a further word. She too was done for, and didn't much like being laughed at just then. I followed her down the trail, still giggling over the silliness. Well, I hope everyone's still awake. It was a dramatic chapter, and I'm really enjoying following this story. Look, just a reminder, we are giving away streamer bundles. This is it'll have to be the last call for today, but we are still giving them away. If you would like to get yourself down to the Avatars Radio Studio, which is in Immortal City, just west of Mistrandur, get up to the top floor of the building, open up a trade window with a Land Dragonfire, you will get yourself a U-Butte streamer bundle absolutely for free. Look forward to seeing you here. You're listening to Podcast and Poetry on Avatars Radio, Radio of the Avatars.
Hi, this is Neil Giraldo.
Hi, this is Pat Benatar, and you are listening to Avatars Radio.
The radio for the avatars.
Hello everyone, this is Asclepius, with the conclusion of this great story from Ulf Burt, entitled Virtue's Forge. Background music by Smart Sound. Chapter 5, Port Graf. The wind had shifted sufficiently west to make this last tack into Port Graf, still a dozen miles off. Sail ho, north by northeast. Be it the same craft we had eyes on before? Aye, sir. Judging by the sail, 'tis the same.
A large triangular black sail, be it damned hard to make out her heading, the lookout replied. Suspicious, I warrant, said Captain Anton, but no threat. We'll be hoisting ale before she could be upon us. 2 hours, lads, and our feet walk the land. Why is that boat so unsettling to me, thought Ulf. Perhaps it was the fear that Arab dhows had evoked in him, memories of his youth as a slave, and the poor unfortunates shackled below decks. He recalled that the difficulties of handling the large lateen sail restrained the size and armaments of such ships. He also remembered that they could sail into the wind better and excelled in ocean crossings. Couriers, spies, and assassins favoured the dhow for its speed. Anton was correct. Within the 2 hours they were docked, and shortly after that enjoying mugs of ale in the tavern. Enjoy some food and drink, Ulf. I will arrange for rooms. We have much to discuss, but all can wait until later, said Merlin as he left the table. I'll leave you in the good hands of our new friends. Ulf and Anton exchanged glances, waiting for Merlin to be out of earshot. So you've not discussed our plans with the wizard, I see, said Anton. Nor do I have any wish to. Given that all I need is at hand, I can produce the inserts in a day or two, and then you can test them out. I need funds for food and shelter, but have little in the way of security. It is my hope we can arrange for something so I can be rid of him. Fear not, Ulf. I have no doubt your idea has merit, and an advance will be forthcoming. Of all virtues I hold dear, honesty is paramount. We will all derive benefit from this, and I perceive you will become a man of means. For some reason, honesty and wizardry are not companions. Tomorrow we meet honest men in pursuit of honest trade. Before I can retire, I must erase from my body the kinks of long days confined in your fine vessel. You have knowledge of these parts. Can you suggest a route for such a walk? Asked Ulf. I would recommend that you walk east from the docks to the palisade that encompasses the town. Follow the interior of the wall until you return to your start. That way, you will become acquainted with the lay of the land. Take this ring and present it to any who may challenge you. I am known to all the guards, and you may explore at will. Ulf stood. They clasped each other's shoulders before Ulf left. The night was clear, and the shattered moon unrisen as Ulf made his way to the docks. In the starlight, Ulf could just make out a dark, unlit ship that was ghosting into the harbour, where it dropped its black sail and anchored. No boat was put out, nor any activity appeared on deck. Chapter 6. Immortality. Merlin, I have only just become less suspicious of your motives, said Ulf. But now, if I understand you correctly, you say I must die in order to test your theory that we are now immortal. Nightfall was darkening the waters of Spindrift Bay, and lights on Graf Island twinkled in the distance. The old lamplighter continued carefully up the cobblestone streets of Port Graf. Quite so, brother, for we have now found ourselves in a realm very different from the one of our births. You yourself have said that death is everywhere, yet no one stays dead. But does this apply to you and me? We did not arrive here by the same manner as these other outlanders did. It is my opinion that we are already dead, said Ulf. This is but some form of transition between death and judgment. Is it not heretical to suggest that a druid such as I could be found among those awaiting judgment? No, Ulf. Your transport here did not involve your death. Magic and circles of stone brought you here. The manner of our transport here is of little consequence. I would prefer that I test the theory on you first. I could conjure up any number of ways to do that, said Ulf. Your words wound me, said Merlin. And you have not speculated upon why we are here and how it was arranged. The truth is, I have not. All my speculations revolve around securing a living and maintaining a roof over my head. My attentions this past fortnight have been upon my enterprise with Anton. We now have 3 excellent apprentices producing the rudder inserts and plenty of orders to keep them busy. But such things, I imagine, are not worthy of a wizard's time. On the contrary, your welfare is of prime interest to me. While you ply your admirable trade, I seek knowledge and information in order to ensure our well-being. I have discovered there are forces about that do not have our best interests at heart, warned Merlin. And why do you believe this? No one here has made any move against me. I feel that I am among friends here, a feeling absent for some years before your arrival. What do you know that I do not? As yet I have no proof, Merlin answered. Only the sure knowledge that a dark storm is gathering. I fear that my gift of sight and prophecy is failing me. Compared to the land we came from, the magical ether here is much more powerful. Every creature around us has some access to this force. Like boulders in a raging torrent, they cause a huge amount of turbulence in the ether. This completely disrupts the laws of cause and effect and confuses my abilities as a seer. What I do know is that the vessel that followed us into Port Graf carried an individual who had a particular interest in us. Many townsfolk were beguiled by this person into revealing all they knew about us. Only gold, ale, and my powers of persuasion could coax the truth from these reluctant informers. The stranger asked 2 questions of everyone, Merlin continued. Had they seen us with a red jewel? And did these infernal watchers take any notice of us? Odd questions indeed, said Ulf. Ninian's jewel is ensconced in a small ingot I use as a paperweight and is quite hidden from view. I have, on many occasions, tried to dispose of the cursed thing, but simply cannot. As for those cursed watchers, they fly into me repeatedly, and I have stepped upon a few of the walking kind. I have been told, said Merlin, that the watchers are an instrument of the oracle, and that the oracle is the source of the resurrections. Who or what the oracle is, no one knows. No one here is immortal. All can be killed. Resurrection, on the other hand, appears to be commonplace. I suggest that we are witnessing a form of reincarnation that awakens us into a likeness or duplicate of ourselves. Hence your supposition that I must die in order to test your theory, said Ulf. We are not immortal then, and we can suffer the pain of death. But then some god hereabouts will resurrect us. This in no way reassures me, nor does it cause me to stop avoiding death at all costs. Moreover, as the agents of the oracle ignore us, then it follows that the oracle is unaware of us, and therefore cannot resurrect us. I now have an increased interest in staying alive. Merlin was silent for a short while. Being unseen by your enemy is the essence of camouflage and stealth. Wars are won and lost by knowing things your adversary does not realize you know. Who then is this spy? An agent of the Oracle, seeking to know us better? Or a foe of the Oracle, seeking some advantage over it? I have resolved to delve deep into the mysteries of this land, Merlin continued. My hope is to find a way to return home. I must seek out grand masters and trainers in every school of magic and learn what I can.
Echoes from the Caverns is brought to you by Lord Baldrith, Asclepius, and Sir Style Teckle. Also brought to you by Avatars Radio. And that was Podcast and Poetry. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you also to Elaine for the awesome simulcast. And if you missed anything, if you would like to catch up with anything, the show is recorded and it will be repeated on Avatars Radio Saturdays 10 a.m. and Sundays 2 p.m. Also, there is a complete anthology of all our shows on the net at thecaverns.net/podcasts. Okay, have a great week. Stay safe. Enjoy yourselves. I'll be back next week with a music program. So long for now. Goodbye.